So just to move to tonight's event and a very brief introduction to our two speakers. Tonight's is the first talk led by the Professional Law Institute. My name is Chris Howard. I'm the Director of Professional Legal Education at King's College, and I'm leading up this new initiative. The Professional Law Institute will be hopefully many things, but one of its main functions is going to be to strengthen our links as King's College London and the Dickson Poon School of Law with the legal profession, to offer a gateway and access to students and others to find out more about the very latest developments and innovations in the way legal practice is undertaken. And that's why I wanted to make as our first sort of launch event this series of talks. Over the last year, I've spent quite a lot of time going out and meeting lawyers, meeting practitioners at every level of practice, and really finding out what their drivers are, what their sort of desires are for their future, and really what's happening with the legal profession as a whole. And I think it's fair to say that, as with all things in life and in the world in its present state, we're in a time of great change and turbulence. Technology, socio-economic disruption, all of the factors which are affecting so many areas are certainly affecting the way law is practiced. Now, what's the impact on lawyers and indeed on the next generation of lawyers? Well, it certainly will mean things are going to change. There's a lot of fear around things like IT and tech and whether actually they pose an existential threat to the existence of the professions. But actually, while there's a lot of concern and discussion, what I've also found is there's a huge enthusiasm and appetite amongst young lawyers to use this period of instability and change to their advantage, to create something new and to forge new career paths. A whole new generation of legal entrepreneurs is emerging, and I think are going to seize this opportunity and make it their own. And that's why I'm delighted to introduce our two speakers tonight. I've met both of these people during my travels over the last year. I'll start with our second speaker first, Sam Spivack. So Sam is somebody I met at a careers event where he was giving a talk from his point of view as a consultant at Kira Systems. And what I particularly liked about Sam's talk, and why I immediately said I'd love you to come and speak to our students, is that he's one of the few tech experts who A, can speak intelligible English in a way that a non-tech person can understand, and who B, can actually give some real practical examples of how AI and legal tech is going to change the way law is practiced. So hopefully I'm sure he'll incite your enthusiasm today, and he can give that story. And while I was speaking to Sam and he was telling me about his work, he said, "Oh, you might be interested in speaking to my partner who does something very different to me, but is also a legal innovator." And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And I went to meet Rebecca at Herbert Smith Freehills, and as soon as she started to tell me about her work, I was absolutely fascinated. A very different type of entrepreneur, a very different type of self-starter, but Rebecca has managed to carve out for herself, I think, a pretty unique niche, certainly at a large firm like Herbert Smith, but I think throughout London. And her work in sort of taking the institutional powerhouse which is Herbert Smith Freehills and actually helping shape and do something within that firm that's going to create incredible social benefit, both domestically and internationally, I think is a magnificent thing to behold. And I think what both speakers really inspire tonight and hopefully bring to you is a story both of their progression, how they've forged their pathway into this very novel and new form of legal career, and also in the substance of their work will inform on how law can actually change lives and change the way we do business. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Rebecca to begin. Just to set some ground rules for this evening, each speaker is going to speak for roughly half an hour or so, and I'll ask you not to have questions during the talks, but we'll have some Q&A afterwards for the discussion to unfold then. And then after we've had some Q&A, through this door there'll be some drinks, so we'll try and make sure we have plenty of time for that also. And obviously if there are any questions you have which you haven't been able to ask, Sam and Rebecca will be happy to take them during the drinks afterwards. So without further ado, I'll invite Rebecca to begin proceedings tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's lovely to see you all here this evening. Thank you very much for making the time. So I'm here to talk a little bit about my rather unconventional path through Herbert Smith Freehills, from graduating in 2009 all the way to becoming their head of social impact investment and social finance. So I started off with a training contract at HSF. I had 4 regular seats, the first one being partnership disputes, then I moved on to corporate tax. I then looked at employment, and I then had a secondment to a National Civil Rights Council called Liberty. I worked with high net worth individuals, I worked with huge corporates like EDF and Virgin, and I worked with the world's largest investment banks. But I also had a chance to work with individuals living within London's poorest borough in Tower Hamlets, and to advise leading human rights organisations and on test cases during my secondment to Liberty, and to support organisations like Anti-Slavery International that are at the forefront of tackling modern slavery and human trafficking. Back then, HSF had a pretty small pro bono practice and a small pro bono offering, which focused on a few initiatives, but enough for me to get a taste for the sort of work that I really enjoyed doing. So in addition to those that I've just mentioned, there was one project that really stole my heart, and actually I couldn't have foreseen how it would go on to shape my career, and that is called Fair Deal Sierra Leone. So, for those of you who haven't been to Sierra Leone, and I'm imagining that's most of you, it is a very small country in between Guinea and Liberia on the west coast of Africa. Around 7 million people living there. And it's ruled by a democratically elected government. The country is sadly well known for its very brutal decade-long civil war, which ravaged the country through the 1990s, and for the damage that it left behind. Sierra Leone remains one of the poorest countries in the world. I think it's 5th from the bottom of the UN Human Development Index. But that's not all there is to say about the country. Sierra Leone is home to some of the world's most beautiful beaches along 450 kilometres of gorgeous coastline. I actually took that picture myself back in 2014. It's a beach that's around 20 minutes out of the capital city, Freetown, so it really is a gorgeous place to live and to travel to. It also offers lots to investors in terms of natural resources, mining capabilities, and diamonds, of course, which you will know about if any of you have seen the movie Blood Diamond. Post-Civil War, investors flooded into the country to take advantage of those kinds of opportunities. However, the government didn't really have the right exposure and the right experience of negotiating those kinds of deals, and so a lot of bad deals were done. This, unfortunately, was the situation that one of our corporate partners found when he went there in 2010 on his sabbatical to work for a pro bono basis for the government. This was a signing of a deal that was done around an agribusiness project in the provinces, and this is one of the deals that he came across that he thought, actually, this is an area where we can really lend our help. So his name is Gavin Davies, and as I said, he was out there in 2010. And what he saw was an opportunity to harness HSF's global expertise to provide the exact same legal support that we deliver to our fee-paying clients around commercial contracts to the Government of Sierra Leone for free, and in doing so try to redress the imbalance that they commonly face at the negotiating table with investors. When he came back to London, he set that up as Fair Deal Sierra Leone, and as part of that, that included a secondment program where we sent our associates for up to 6 months to work directly on the ground based in the heart of government in Freetown. Fast forward 2 years, I found myself as a first seat trainee, just starting out, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at the firm, and I came across this amazing initiative, and I thought, wow, I had no idea that big city firms were doing this kind of thing, really at the forefront of international development and bolstering the rule of law in developing countries. So I nagged the partners on that steering committee to let me join. I said, I'll make the coffee, I'll take notes, I'll do whatever I can, just please let me be involved. And eventually, after weeks of emails and nagging, they said, yes, fine, come along, probably just to get me off their backs. I did start off just taking the notes and making the coffee, but over time, my contributions grew, and I was in a really good place, so 2 years later, after I qualified into the corporate tax team, to asked whether they might send me on secondment to Sierra Leone. I had 2 challenges. So, firstly, the people who'd gone before me were 2 much more senior individuals. They were senior associates. They had been at the firm for around 5 and 6 years. And not that this was a challenge in terms of allowing me to go on secondment, but I was also the first woman who showed an interest in going there. And I think, from a kind of safety perspective, there were concerns, and they wanted to make sure that I would feel comfortable working there on the ground. And the truth is actually that was never an issue while I was out there. I felt safer walking around the streets of Freetown than I do in London. So I was lucky enough to be offered that opportunity, and off I flew to Freetown in 2014. Unfortunately, it was not the best year to be living in Sierra Leone. Some of you may have been aware of the Ebola crisis that broke out in 2014 across Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea. It was a very challenging time to be there, but actually, understanding the role that lawyers can play in those kinds of humanitarian crises, again, really helped to shape what I ended up wanting to do with my career. So, I'm not going to lie, initially I sat there, based in the President's office, working in the Public-Private Partnership Unit, thinking, what on earth can I do? This country is going through an incredibly tough time, a serious public crisis, but I'm a lawyer. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not signed up with MSF. How can I offer my skills and my services to support the country in this time of need? It actually became clear to me after President Perlman declared a public state of emergency, and that was in the summer of 2014. And what happened then was a bunch of key contractors that were providing essential services like water and power across the country, things that you need at the best of times, let alone at the worst of times. They said, well, this is what we call a force majeure situation, and we are pulling our people out of the country. We are going to suspend services, we're going to terminate our agreements. So we assembled overnight a team of 37 lawyers, and myself included, to advise the government on how they could maintain those relationships and keep the lights on and keep those key contractors within the country, but also how they could get on the front foot with other contractors that hadn't yet thought of doing this kind of thing. That was the sort of emergency response that we saw, and a role for lawyers to play in that. However, we also started thinking about the longer term. Up to that point, Sierra Leone had around, I think it's 20% GDP growth rate, which is huge, absolutely staggering. Sadly, throughout the Ebola crisis, and also coupled with the commodities prices slump, that then went into negative digits. And this is something that the World Bank actually foresaw happening. So they were publishing papers throughout 2014 and 15 around something called aversion behaviour amongst the investment community, where there had been lots of excitement in investing in Sierra Leone to date, but actually because of the negative perception that was built up through the Ebola crisis, investors were saying it's just not a place that we want to deploy capital into, thank you very much. So we thought something we could do to try to tackle that aversion behaviour is partner with a couple of our clients, Standard Chartered Bank and Prudential, to develop an investor's guide to the country and offer an independent private sector perspective on what it means to invest in Sierra Leone. We worked closely with the UK government and with the Sierra Leone government in producing that. But what was really unique about it, and this is us launching it at the UN with President Koroma, I'm slightly vertically challenged there, I've got to put my heels on. But what was really unique about this was that we refused to gloss over the challenges. This was going to be an independent perspective on the investment landscape. That wasn't always an easy point when we were going over the draft with our contacts within the government of Sierra Leone. Initially there was some pushback, please don't say that about my project, please don't say that about this sector. But actually we made the point that really the credibility of the guide lies in its independence. After we published, some of the ministers that we work with, and a couple of them are in this picture, came back to me and said, okay, so we put the challenges out there. What can we do now? How can we work with you to try to address those challenges? What legislative reforms do we need to introduce to encourage the right kinds of investors to come into the country? What kinds of protections and systems do we need to put in place to make sure that the investment process is easier for investors to navigate? So we worked with the government in the years after the Ebola crisis to try to introduce reforms and try to improve that investment climate. And we ended up making some headlines in the process. So when I came back from secondment, I couldn't really go back to my regular corporate tax job, as you can imagine. It was really the start of a new journey for me. And I wanted to find a way whereby I could do the sort of work I was doing in Sierra Leone full time. This was unprecedented at the firm and really very new area within UK law firms. Pro bono wasn't the sort of thing that it is today. So I started off building a business case and trying to prove to the partners that I worked with that there was value in having a full-time pro bono lawyer in the London office. So what is the business case for pro bono? Well, it starts off by saying that actually social impact is now very much viewed as an opportunity for top-line growth. We can do well and do good, and in fact doing good can help us do better financially. So explaining to them that actually this is something that our clients were increasingly focusing on. The Sustainable Development Goals that were introduced by the UN present a $12 trillion revenue opportunity, and our clients are tapping into that. By us trying to tap into that too, we are presenting ourselves as peers with our clients. We're building a different kind of relationship with our commercial clients. We're also appealing to the people that we depend on within the firm to do our work. So all of our associates, all of our lawyers. At the moment, firms are really struggling to keep hold of that talent. It's not easy. You know, millennials and Generation Z want more from their jobs than just a salary at the end of the month. And this kind of work, the kind of work that I did in Sierra Leone, the kind of work that we do in Tower Hamlets, gives people purpose. It gives people a social license to operate. So this is the business case that I took to the partners at the time around why we should have a proper integrated pro bono practice at the firm. I've mentioned some of these points already, but I read online the other day that around a third of startups are actually focused on having some form of social impact in today's world. So we want to be part of that story. We want to be in that space. We want to be advising those kinds of clients that are innovating to do good. We also want to work with our current clients to get access to the C-suite that's driving the corporate social responsibility agenda within our clients. And of course, developing our people. So one thing that I saw as a trainee was the kind of responsibility and autonomy and client relationship building skills that you can get and develop as a junior on pro bono work. You just don't have those kinds of opportunities until you're much, much more senior on the fee earning side. And finally, one of the key lessons that I took from my experience in Sierra Leone was that commercial lawyers, that there's a need for us. There is a huge unmet legal need out there that needs commercial lawyers to provide support. So this is not just about, I don't need to become a human rights lawyer in order to do good in this world. I can actually use my commercial legal skills to support charities, to support NGOs, to support social enterprises, and of course to support governments. And therefore bring in pro bono matters that are aligned with the core expertise of HSF lawyers. They bought it, amazingly, they bought it. And I became the first pro bono lawyer at HSF outside of Australia. So since then, the growth trajectory has been pretty healthy, and it's not all been done by myself. I've massively benefited from mentors and sponsors and an incredible network of lawyers that I work with closely around the firm that support me in what I do every day. We have grown the practice from something that was small and ad hoc to a fully integrated practice within the firm that delivers last year 63,000 hours of pro bono work across the world. That is around £18 million worth of free advice. Our 5 core areas that we focus on are access to justice, so predominantly thinking about the sorts of issues that arose post the introduction of LASPO in 2013, which brought in a whole heap of cuts to legal aid, for example. So that will be legal advice clinics through which we provide social welfare advice, housing advice, civil liberties advice to individuals that otherwise can't access that kind of support. Then we also advise a huge range of charities and NGOs on all of their needs, whether it's on a lease that they may need help with, or it's on a particular commercial contract that they need assistance with, a fundraising agreement, for example. There's lots of that good work going on. Within human rights, we have a particular focus around anti-trafficking and anti-slavery, and that was really a response to the UK's leadership in introducing the Modern Slavery Act in 2015. International development, I already mentioned our work in Sierra Leone. What's been fantastic is to be part of that growth story there. So when I came to the project, I think we'd offered around 750,000, maybe £1 million worth of free advice. Since then, we have delivered £6.5 million of free advice. So that's in just 5 years, that level of growth to the Government of Sierra Leone. We're also now looking to increase that programme and expand it into other countries like Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda and Senegal. And finally, the area that I dedicate most of my own practice to now is social impact investment. Before I go on to the next slide, I just wondered if I could get a quick show of hands as to who has heard of impact investment. Oh, great. That's brilliant. That's more than I'm used to. Fabulous. So just to say that, part of my ability to now focus on that area as my core practice together with charity law has been the fact that I've been able to grow the team. So it started off with just me in London, and there's now 3 of us in London, actually 4 of us because we have a full-time secondee based with us too, rolling secondment, and there's 4 of us in Sydney as well. So that meant that I get to focus on this particular area of passion of mine. So for those of you that haven't heard of impact investment, and I'm sorry for those who have and already know all about this is how I like to think about it and how I describe it to those who are new to the space. I see it very much as a kind of funding spectrum. At one end, you've got philanthropy, traditional charitable giving, where all that a donor really wants to see in return is some form of social or environmental impact. They're not expected to get any of their money back. Usually there will be some quite strict reporting obligations in place and a sort of impact measurement framework, so to speak, to make sure that that money is being used in the right way, in the way that the donor intended. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got traditional investment, where the investor is really looking to maximise their financial return, and those are the sorts of clients that HSF would regularly be advising on a fee-paying basis every single day. A very sort of crude explanation is that impact investing is basically everything that takes place in between those 2 bookends. So what impact investors want to see is both a financial return and some form of social, environmental impact as well. I've got some examples there at the top of the kinds of social enterprises that impact investors might invest into. So businesses that are developing affordable housing, fintech enterprises that are assisting with financial inclusion, so getting those who are unbanked into the banking system, e-commerce platforms that would provide a route to market for marginalised artisans. I'm going to come on to talk about one of those initiatives later. And also clean tech enterprises, so renewables companies. Earlier last year, we recognised that although we've been doing lots of good work in this space as a firm, we actually didn't have an international recognised platform from which to sell or explain or tell the story of that work. So we launched it as a standalone practice area that combines both pro bono work at the philanthropic end of that spectrum and fee-paying work at the profit-making end of that spectrum. We've also come up with different fee arrangements and models that allow us to chart the growth of our clients. So let's say we're advising a social impact startup. I'll give you an example of one of my clients called Bean. You should all look up because they're a fantastic organisation. And what they do is they are trying to provide a crowdfunding platform that will enable people to provide totally transparent funding to assist homeless people to get into fully paid and long-term stable employment. You can do that by logging onto their website, and you can actually give your money to one individual and track their growth and their progress through their careers as they go on. They're very clearly a pro bono client, particularly right at the outset when they're starting up. They haven't got any funds, they haven't raised any capital, so they're definitely at the philanthropic end of the spectrum and qualify for our pro bono support. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got clients like Sky. Everyone's heard of Sky, I imagine. They set up something called the Sky Ocean Rescue Fund last year, and that is an impact investment fund that is investing into social enterprises tackling the global oceans plastics crisis. That, very clearly for a client like Sky, is not going to be pro bono, that's full fees. But what about a client that comes to us that says, I run an agribusiness that produces low-cost nutritional foodstuffs in Ghana. They might start off being a pro bono client, but actually as sales start to increase and they start to be making profit, we may transition them into an arrangement which sees them as a part pro bono, part fee-paying client. And this is really novel. There aren't any other law firms out there that are doing this kind of thing, so it's really exciting to start, for me, to play with these kinds of ideas in building a practice. What sorts of things are we delivering, what kind of advice are we delivering to our clients in this space? Well, really, it's everything that either a startup or an investor would need. So we're advising clients on the establishment of funds, we're also advising on the downstream investments of those funds, we're advising on sort of finance aspects, so a lot of that is looking at kind of convertible debt and those sorts of issues, all the kind of corporate arrangements that you might think about around structuring, data protection and tax. And of course, IP is massive for any startup, and also of huge interest for the investors too as they try to commercialise their products. who are we advising through HSF Impact, which is perhaps unimaginatively named, but at least does what it says on the tin. So lots of big names that you'll recognise here. I've already mentioned the work that we've been doing with Sky, and Beam is up there too. But I just thought that I'd pull out a couple more clients that might be of interest. So UNHCR, you might be surprised to see that up there. It sort of stands out a little bit different from the rest of them. But they are spearheading a really exciting initiative, which I'm sure you'll hear much more about in the press. What UNHCR is trying to do is to take refugees that have talent, artisanal talent and skills, and connect them with markets in the West where their goods are in demand. So let's say you've got a community of Syrian refugees living in Jordan that have for hundreds of years been producing beautiful baskets or beautiful jewellery. And there's a huge demand for those goods over here in the West, but actually at the moment there's no way of connecting those two. So what UNHCR is trying to do is to develop this platform that in the middle they will insert a local social enterprise that they will identify who has product development and export experience that will work with the refugees to create a fully saleable product line that the likes of Net-a-Porter, Farfetch, Liberty, Selfridges will want to buy and then sell to people like us. That's a really exciting initiative for us to be involved in on many levels. We're the only law firm involved in the project. We get to broaden our network internationally of loads of different social enterprises based around the world. And of course, we get to help UNHCR to assist refugees in need. Another example on that slide is Danone. So you wouldn't have thought that Danone has much related to achieving social impact, but actually they took a very interesting decision a couple of years ago to register the entire Danone group as something called a B Corp. And B Corps are not a new kind of entity, but actually it's a certification or a registration that companies can choose to seek. And actually it's a very, very difficult process, but an organisation called B Labs is the sort of holder of the certification process. So what happens is the company will go to B Labs and say, we want to become a B Corp. Then they will have to meet lots of very, very difficult, strenuous standards in terms of their environmental impact, how they treat their employees, what they're doing to support the local community. And once they meet all of those standards, the directors and the officers of the company actually have to incorporate the interests of all stakeholders, not just shareholders, into their fiduciary duty. That is completely revolutionary in terms of corporate philosophy. So really, really exciting to see a leader like Danone taking that move. Their plan is to have the entire group be registered as a B Corp by 2030. Another big and well-known client on there is BlackRock. So again, what would BlackRock have to do with achieving social impact? But they are one of the leading asset managers when it comes to social impact funds, and they have developed a new set of products where they're rolling out across all of the funds that they are selling environmental social governance concerns. So that again is really quite revolutionary. So lots going on, as you can see, both on the pro bono side and also on the prepaid side. So where do we go from here? I think that the key thing for me is driving home this message, both internally and externally, that, as I mentioned earlier, doing well and doing good are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can mutually reinforce each other. That social value can produce economic value, and economic value allows you to generate more social value. And that where we can use business practices to try to achieve good, that can usually, I think, end up producing much more efficient and effective results. The charities sector is very, very important, and we will continue to support that as a firm. But I don't see the social enterprise space or the impact investment space as competing with that. I actually think it is bringing a whole different aspect to the picture and actually levering in new capital that would otherwise have gone to more profit-making entities that don't have a social impact lens to it. So it's a way of bringing more money in to the doing good space. We're in a good place now, and it may sound like it was easy to get there, but actually it really wasn't, and there have been loads of challenges along the way. It is not easy to try to push a pro bono agenda within an organisation that is inherently geared towards profit making. We have to, as a firm, keep the lights on, and the whole concept of having pro bono as a proper integrated practice within a firm is really pretty new. So it has been challenging. I think what has saved me, on the days when it's been really difficult, are the champions and the sponsors and the mentors within my firm and outside of my firm. I would say that, you know, as a lawyer starting out, it can be slightly intimidating to follow up with the people that, you know, really impress you in a meeting, or the people that you see speaking at a lecture. But I would do that. You know, actually, it's a huge boost to their confidence. You'd be amazed how many partners that I've approached and I've said, wow, that was really impressive, you know, would you mind if I can get involved in that initiative? Have sort of said, oh, I'm really chuffed that you've come up to me. And you would think that these partners are sort of on pedestals and quite inaccessible, but really, you know, I think chase after those people who you see that you're impressed with, that are living the kind of dream that you would want for yourself as a lawyer. And you know, make sure that you have those sponsors and those mentors internally that are going to get you through those difficult times. And the truth is, you can develop a new and innovative pathway even within a big organisation like HSF. You can effectively run a startup within the safety of a huge international organisation. It is possible, it's hard work, but you can do it. And it's definitely worth trying before quitting.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, as I said, we'll take questions on both speakers at the end, but now I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to give us his journey. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rebecca. That was. This is going to be slightly different. We're going to make a little bit of a U-turn, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about legal tech, legal AI more specifically. Just before I kick off, how many people have heard of AI? I'm assuming to see hands, yeah. And machine learning as a concept, how many have heard about that? That's your experts, that's perfect. Let's explain. What I'll do today, just as an overview, is I'm going to run through my personal journey. Like Rebecca, I was also I'm a former lawyer. I trained in a firm called Berwin Leighton Paisner, where I was a real estate lawyer. And my journey there which started out very normally, into a role that I do now, which is quite different. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that. Also give you an overview of what I see in my day-to-day as the landscape that is being shaped at the moment in the legal and artificial intelligence space. Why machine learning as a concept in the first place? Why do we even have this? And the impact it might be having, is having at our clients. And then a very, very brief look at Kira, a few screenshots, and finally with some thoughts about the future for you, aspiring lawyers. I think just as a first starter here, before I jump in, this is all about opportunity and change, and I think goes back to what Chris was saying at some of the points Rebecca raised. You can shape your futures, and with the changes that are going on both socioeconomically alongside also technologically, there are actually increasing opportunities out there to do new things, still using your immensely talented skill sets, which I will touch on as part of my talk. So, where to begin? I was at university not far away, actually. I was at LSE down the road, so sorry. Where I was a historian and as an undergrad. And it was about 2008. For those of you who didn't know much about what was going on in 2008, there was a big recession. Closest thing that we had since the Great Depression. Really quite tough job market. But one thing that really was booming was the law, and I have to admit I didn't grow up wanting to be a lawyer necessarily, but the opportunity to do law was so good at the time, and it was a really interesting area for me to get into, to use my analytical abilities. So from university, went into law school and became a lawyer. And pardon the image, I thought it was the best image I could find online about lawyers. So, practiced, obviously qualified into real estate, where I practiced for 3 years as an associate. A great firm, had incredibly good experiences. But there was something for me personally that wasn't fulfilling me enough. And a little bit like how I think Rebecca mentioned that, there is a structure in a law firm, there is a hierarchy, and that makes sense because there's a tradition there. But Rebecca did something that was internal, I did something external. I wanted to go and possibly find new boundaries to push that would have taken me a lot longer within a firm, and I was increasingly interested in technology. So I decided that I was going to align myself with what we call, I guess, fourth industrial revolution, although I think that's probably too overhyped. But the new changes that are coming in our industry, but also in all industries as a whole, fintech, that happened about 10 to 15 years ago, and I think we are, and it's obviously still going on, and I think within the legal AI tech space, that we're really seeing the fruits of an initial inception probably about 5 years ago or so right now. And as part of this, I will touch on some of the practical implications that are going on in firms. So, first thing to say actually is lawyers are very highly skilled people. And I think at the time when I was thinking about what I'm going to do with my career, having spent quite a long time relatively long time at least, being a lawyer, I wasn't necessarily, it wasn't clear to me actually how highly skilled I was, frankly. And these are just some of the things I think as students, and then going into law school and then finally hopefully into training contracts and beyond, you will really gain through your experience. Lawyers are highly analytical people, and being analytical is a great thing. It means that you can break problems down, problem solve into its component parts, and come up with an answer, a conclusion. You can problem solve, you can understand the root cause of certain issues. You can communicate well. You have to engage with people day to day, especially as a solicitor, but even as a barrister as well. You need to stand up in court and present your case. So communication skills, excellent communication skills. Pretty much every lawyer I come across has brilliant communication skills. Obviously, you're very good at writing and generally drafting, again, a very important quality. You'll be amazed on the emails you see out there, so all lawyers incredibly good email etiquette. And there's the advisory and strategy piece, where I think I've always been quite commercially focused. I think even as a lawyer, one of my favourite things, it's very strange to say, was coming up with fee quotes from the partner I used to work for. And I really enjoyed that aspect, actually. It's something I realised about my time in practice. But coming up with a strategy is actually what you do every day, and you don't even realise it. So you've got all these skills, and all these skills mean you can be a really great lawyer, but you could also apply them in other ways. And I don't think at any time previously there's been an opportunity for young aspiring lawyers and those in practice to actually do something different, which is what I'm going to show you a little bit now. So, legal AI landscape. So this is looking at what we see in today in the market, and just try to explain to you what you're looking at here. The large grey bar is what we're seeing predominantly, and as you go up, it's decreasing in prominence. So many of you probably are familiar with the idea that obviously you're going to be drafting a lot of documents. That takes time and is at considerable cost to clients. There is a lot of technology out there harnessing the power of machine learning and AI that manage that process much more expeditiously. It's important because a lot of that work is time and cost intensive, and machines will be able to help expedite that and improve the overall efficiency, which is fundamentally being driven, maybe not so much by the lawyers themselves, but certainly by their clients. As you go up, you go into sort of a research basis, where many of you I'm sure are using LexisNexis or Westlaw, increasingly deploying machine learning algorithms behind that, which I will touch on, by the way. I know I haven't explained what I at least see as machine learning as yet, but I will touch on it shortly. There's an increasing focus on automation, not just of technology actually, but also of process. And that's another piece that is increasingly being looked at by firms as to how to better structure and process map their operations. And I won't include too much consultant jargon, but fundamentally, how do we get to A to Z or Z as quickly as possible, and also as productively and accurately as possible. And lastly, the prediction piece. So where there's technologies out there that actually are predicting outcomes, largely at the moment in the litigation space, where you're seeing a lot of, and many of you probably who are interested in this, Artificial Law is a great resource. I would certainly recommend others, but there's a lot of new tech out there which is trying to predict the outcome of cases, but also of potential prosecution and term of offence. I would say that should be treated with a degree of caution, and we need to employ ethics around how we use our AI, which is not part of my talk, but something that is heavily being looked at the moment in the industry as a whole and by the Law Society. So firstly, next I guess to say is why machine learning? So I mentioned before, all of you are experts obviously in machine learning, but machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence, and really, and this is I guess why I'm here, because I managed to explain it in some layman way, but the truth is I'm a lawyer by background, I'm not a technologist, so I always do explain things with a legal mindset. Machine learning is there to actually be more relevant for us in the way in which we look for things. So I always sort of use Google as an example, but Google HQ, how is it that when you type in Google search bar, I want to look for cats? How is it that Google presents cats to you, lots of images of cats or references to cats, and not dogs or cheetahs or whatever else it may be? The reason is because Google has gone through and spent a lot of time feeding its algorithm, which is based on machine learning coding, with examples of literally megapixel examples of what cats look like, a variety of cats, and will deploy some degree of parameters around the extent to what something is a cat, and then that suddenly becomes a dog. And that's how Google understands a cat. It doesn't understand it because you've taught it that this is a cat, and you've shown it a cat. You've actually physically been, digitally been feeding it with images of cats. In the same way, machine learning will be very robust for the way in which, at least from a transactional sense, the way in which lawyers do their work. So you may be familiar with keyword searching. I like to call it the famous Control-F. Control-F is good, it works, but there's some issues with Control-F because if I put this as an analogy to you, if I say to you as a Control-F or keyword personnel, go out there and find for me 100 different oranges from 100 different supermarkets, and you're a Control-F searcher, you'll be looking for orange, the term orange. That means that you might bring back also things that look orange but isn't actually an orange. If I said to you instead, and you're a machine learning searcher, and you've been taught well, like I think Kira has, that I need to find those oranges in 100 different supermarkets, the likelihood is that you'll bring back mainly oranges. In some cases, you might bring back some lemons, some limes, some grapefruits. But the underlying concept of what you're searching for is there. So why is that important? Well, in drafting anything, and those of you who've seen contracts before, you will know that things are always drafted differently in various different ways. It's hard to pinpoint always that exact provision by just looking for a keyword. And I must admit, given time pressures, you are sometimes searching for keywords in documents, especially when you're skim reading. So you can get a much more relevant and accurate search mechanism through the means of machine learning in the document review space, which is where I'm going to focus today because Kira is largely playing in that space. These are some pain points around what the manual process currently envisages, and many of you who go into practice will obviously probably come across these, although hopefully with technology like Kira it will become probably more user-friendly and a better experience, and maybe not as late at nights as maybe we had in practice. 30 to 60% fees billed in any matter generally, this is across the board, is associated with review aspects of a transaction. It's pretty high and not always that valuable work. So imagine at a time when that could be reduced heavily and you can actually spend more time on reviewing the documents and actually maybe more of those documents and not rely on what we call in industries like sampling a certain data set of a larger document set. People can make mistakes, we're all human. And using a human plus machine approach, which is very much what Kira is, and I want to lay fears here immediately that this is here to take away any jobs, this is here to enhance existing roles and to potentially, although explicitly I'd say, but offer new opportunities as well, if you are savvy enough to find them. And there are obviously consistent themes you'd be looking for in any transaction, which is why something like Kira can help. So I've kind of gone through this, but the point that I'm trying to get is there is variety out there in the world. in ways such as, in this case, I'm looking at something which is known as a change of control provision. Now that could be drafted in a whole host of different ways and refer to transfer of ownership or assets, or change of ownership or change of control. With a tool like Kira, or with a tool with using it or harnessing the power of machine learning, you can really capture those things much more quickly and get to the bottom and the crux of the issues much faster. So a little brief look at Kira. Why am I showing you a slide with cavemen dragging around wheels? This is really where we are right now, and I don't mean this in the sense that we're dragging wheels around. What we are doing right now with machine learning, and I foresee for the foreseeable future, to be completely honest with you, because of the complexity and nature of what the work you do, is this is here to augment a process you currently perform. In no way is it there to replace a human, in the same way that with the wheel we managed to expedite goods and services much more quickly than we did when dragging it around. It also meant that not as many of us had to drag it around, that's true, but we were able to be more efficient about getting from A to B. In the same way as what machine learning tools like Kira offer is an opportunity to basically do the work faster and possibly also, more holistically, but not to replace people. So these are just some of our clients that we work with, and it's quite a broad stretch. Sorry, Herbert Smith's in there, so it's amongst others. But yeah, it's quite a broad group. We are, just by way of background, if many of you, I don't know how many of you know about Kira, it's still a relatively small company. We started in 2014, well, commercially around 2014. We've grown to about 130 people now globally. We employ lots of former lawyers alongside consultants and management consultants and those looking for different opportunities within the sales and marketing space. Headquartered in Toronto, where there's a huge buzzy AI scene out there. But my role is to look after our existing clients like these across EMEA in Australia, and act as almost a consultant internally to advise as to the best way to deploy the technology, get the most use case out of it, and also to advise on how we seek return on investment and pricing strategies for clients if firms wish to explore that. A few high-level overview, just so you can see what Kira is actually doing. This is a practical few slides. So what you can see here is Kira is actually starting to classify information for you in your document set. Why is that important? So when you're in practice, what will tend to happen on a transaction is you'll be part of a team, especially if you're a solicitor, say, in a corporate firm, and I should add, mostly my experience is shaped by being in a large corporate firm. And as a junior on the team, you're tasked with often going through quite a large index and understanding what the document set looks like, who may need to come onto the transaction. If it's a multidisciplinary deal, which kind of specialisms need to be brought in, which foreign offices might need to come into that deal, or affiliate firms, especially where you've got foreign jurisdictional documents. Kira will show you all of that information pretty quickly. It will tell you if something's a contract, non-contract, along with document types and languages that documents are writing. This is still not telling you anything material. All it's doing is it's flagging the information that you would otherwise have to find by just going line by line through an Excel spreadsheet. So this is, I'm trying to give you some examples of how this is not going to replace interpretive, highly skilled thinking. What Kira also does do is it gives you a high-level overview of the kinds of things you might be looking for in the transaction. So often, Rebecca will know this, she'll be agreeing with her client in a review exercise, and we need to look for these certain things in our contract. We want to know if we are not compliant in certain areas, and it can be really any area whatsoever. Kira will give you an overview of how many, the prevalence of certain kinds of things that is found in the document that you've asked them to find. So, for instance, how many assignment provisions are there? It doesn't, again, tell you whether the assignment provision is material. It's not a robot lawyer. It's not going to advise you. It's just going to give you that information so that you can then move forward more expeditiously and possibly maybe more accurately on a larger sample data set. And then what you'll do is we'll jump into the Kira platform, and as a reviewer, and hopefully some of you as future lawyers out there will be in the Kira platform one day using this. What you'll see is on the left-hand side, the original document. One positive thing is that it's all text searchable immediately, which is quite, having come from a real estate background and working on a lot of older documents and leases, it can be quite a bugbear. So that's immediately done. But on the right-hand side really is Kira extracting that information, and it's telling you, just in the verbatim text, what it's found relating, in this case, to a change in control provision. The lawyer still interprets the information, and for as far as I see, there is no changes happening there, because frankly, especially in the kinds of work you might end up doing, it's far too complex to rely on a machine that will have to be relied upon from a risk perspective to just come up with that answer. It's always going to need humans driving that process. And again, that's what we'll come to shortly, is that opportunity that's there for you as future lawyers to get engaged with technology, make it your friend, and raise your profiles internally by doing so. A bit like Rebecca's done in a very different kind of space, but a space where there is desperate need for change, frankly. And then the last thing is a report. So you can then, whatever you do is you're summarising your reports that will come as an output that you can automatically just generate through Kira or as a Word or Excel version. So what you're doing here is you're doing a review and you're preparing a report, and it's all being done at the same time. I know it sounds almost so straightforward, it's like, why didn't this happen previously? But actually what's going on behind the wheel is pretty complicated stuff, and I think we're only at the beginning, and the output always does, I think, surprise people, especially if you show it to partners who had to maybe sit through this process in a manual data room, in a physical data room. They actually feel pretty depressed about it, I think. So, future of law. Pretty big statement, but what do I think is going on in the legal AI space, but what will that impact be also broadly in the industry? So I think we are along the course of a human plus machine approach. I don't think we are going to a place where we are going to rely entirely on machines to provide our legal advice. Now, saying that, I would like to caveat that with, there are some areas that are highly commoditized, possibly conveyancing as an example I give you, or probate, where eventually there may not be a need so much for human interaction. But in all the areas where there are complex issues that don't always have a yes or no or a binary answer, it's going to be really hard to have a machine just do all of that. So hopefully that does allay some fears in the room as to what's going on when you hear AI, because I do think there's a massive amount of hype in the press, and actually it hurts space because people assume it's their enemy, but when actually all it's trying to do is help fundamentally, the client of the law firm because they want to pay possibly less money or more cost-effective service, but also actually fundamentally the lifestyle of the lawyer as well, because you can get your work done much quicker and perhaps even more accurately, so you don't have to be trawling through that endless amounts of paper which is there. So manual review, I've gone over this. This pictures kind of depict kind of what I came into when I started, and hopefully that won't have to be you so many times, because actually law is a really stimulating career, and it should stimulate you, and you shouldn't have to do the photocopying and the putting in a partner's billing amounts into a machine. You should be doing much more valuable, skillful stuff. And actually also, just to say that with a machine like this, you can actually get to that information faster, which means you can learn faster to some extent. As a junior lawyer, I didn't always know what an alienation provision maps look like, and I could find varieties of that provision much faster using a machine like Kira, because it could highlight that and identify that to me. So, to sort of surmise everything and finish it off, I really believe we are all in this room, we can shape the future, but especially those aspiring lawyers in here, and you're currently at university or perhaps a postgrad and looking at law school and opportunities. I would advise you to continue, if you are passionate about law, to be lawyers. Don't go off and think, oh, now I just need to know how to code. That is helpful, But in every single respect, there is always going to be a demand for good lawyers. And actually doing time in practice only adds experience to that. So you can better facilitate, a bit like I think I do, the technology space. Because what's increasingly happening in our space now is that you're seeing so many more lawyers operate this dual function of fee-earning work, private practice, plus innovation. So when you do go to your vacation schemes or in your training contracts and beyond, look out for innovation groups and look out for, so they have some funny, wonderful titles, but change management process or improvement process or whatever it might be. There's lots of different names arising, or AI adoption. But the reality is that that is there for you, and it's for you to go out and seek it. And when I started, we didn't really have that actually in truth, and that was only in about 2012 when I started my training contract. Even in 2014, we didn't really have as robust a department as I know my firm does have now. So those opportunities are there for you, and really it's there for you to change. And with all of this, the technology is obviously key, but it's actually people that drive innovation in the true meaning of the word. Because innovation isn't just, let's just throw some tech at it and see what happens. It's actually, let's understand our issues, apply whatever technology we have to solve them, but in a process which is actually mapped out by human beings that makes sense. So, for instance, one of my clients is a part-time, so I guess internally has a percentage split between his fee-earning work and his dedication to innovation. And what he's managed to do is pretty impressive. And for instance, he set up an incubator within the firm, which offers opportunities for young legal tech startups to go in there and showcase their stuff and develop their technology alongside the firm, and possibly even seek investment. So there are these new roles out there, and what I'd say is don't worry if you think you're becoming redundant. You absolutely are not. In fact, this space is ripe for opportunity. And that's it. Thank you.